The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Picture Athens in 432 BC. The bustling marketplace falls silent. Philosophical debates halt mid-sentence. A heavy dread settles over the city as Spartan messengers deliver their ultimatum: bend the knee or prepare for war. On Mix Hill, Athenian citizens gather in heated debate. The aggressive faction demands a preemptive strike. The cautious ones know this means certain death against Sparta's legendary war machine. The peacekeepers plead for surrender, while others recognize this as weakness that will only invite more aggression. Emotions run high, voices clash, and the city teeters on the edge of disaster. Then, as the sun dips toward the horizon, silence spreads through the crowd. A figure approaches, Pericles, now past 60, the city's elder statesman. For decades, he's guided Athens not through force or passionate rhetoric, but through quiet wisdom. He built the city into a beacon of prosperity, commissioning the magnificent Parthenon that watches over them still. As chaos threatens to consume the city, he begins to speak. His voice cuts through the noise with calm authority. He proposes something unexpected, a defensive strategy. "Let the Spartans come," he says. "We'll retreat behind our walls, use our superior navy for supplies, and raid their coastlines. They'll grow frustrated, their resources will dry up, their alliances will fracture." Then he delivers his most prescient warning: "What I fear isn't the enemy's strategy, but our own mistakes." The Athenians, trusting his wisdom, vote to follow his plan. But what happens next reveals a timeless truth about human nature. War comes, and with it, a devastating plague that kills a third of the population, including Pericles himself. Without their rational guide, the Athenians become prisoners of their emotions. They abandon his patient strategy and, driven by grief and rage, launch a catastrophic expedition to Sicily. A campaign so reckless it would have been unthinkable under Pericles. The result? Complete annihilation of their army and navy. Athens' golden age ends not because Sparta was stronger, but because the Athenians lost control of themselves. This ancient story mirrors our own lives. It reveals what happens when human nature runs unchecked. We believe we're rational beings carefully planning our futures. But, as Robert Greene reveals in his masterwork, The Laws of Human Nature, we're dominated by forces we barely understand: deep emotions, tribal instincts, and the fragile ego within us all. Greene, celebrated author of The 48 Laws of Power, has spent a lifetime studying human behavior patterns, from ancient rulers to modern business titans. The Laws of Human Nature is his codebook for understanding the most complex and dangerous animal on the planet, ourselves. By the end of our time together, you'll have a new lens for viewing the world. You'll learn to recognize hidden motives behind people's actions, see through the masks they wear, and protect yourself from toxic individuals who thrive on chaos. But more importantly, you'll learn to look inward, confront the darker parts of your own nature, and master the emotional self that so often leads to our greatest mistakes. This isn't just about understanding others. It's about taking control of your own destiny. Have you ever done something you knew was a terrible idea, but couldn't stop yourself? Maybe you fell for someone clearly wrong for you, or got swept up in an argument and said things you instantly regretted. Looking back, you wonder, what came over me? It feels like a stranger lives inside you, making decisions without permission. Robert Greene reveals that this stranger isn't a stranger at all. It's the most fundamental part of who we are, our emotional self. This brings us to the first and most important law of human nature, the Law of Irrationality. We imagine ourselves as rational beings, making decisions based on logic and careful thought. But the truth, our emotions are in the driver's seat. They color our thinking, making us gravitate toward ideas that soothe our ego and confirm what we already believe. They make us see what we want to see, not what's actually there. This disconnect from reality is the source of our worst decisions and negative patterns. Think back to Pericles and the Athenians. While he lived, he acted as their rational mind, their inner Athena, as Greene calls it. He forced them to think long-term, to resist the emotional pull of a glorious battle that would have destroyed them. The moment he died, their emotions took over. Driven by fear, grief, and desperation for quick victory, they invaded Sicily. This wasn't sound strategy. It was an emotional reaction, a fantasy of easy conquest that led to ruin. We do this constantly, just on smaller scales. We invest in risky schemes because we're excited by quick money, ignoring warning signs. We stay in bad relationships out of fear of being alone. We engage in online arguments, fueled by outrage, without truly listening. Greene argues that rationality isn't something we're born with. It's a skill we must cultivate. It's the ability to step back from the heat of the moment, recognize the emotions clouding our judgment, and think instead of just react. So how do we begin cultivating this power? The first step is recognizing the biases our emotions create in our thinking. One of the most powerful is confirmation bias, our tendency to seek evidence supporting what we already believe. If you think an investment is solid, you'll subconsciously seek articles and opinions that agree with you, dismissing those that don't. You're not searching for truth, you're searching for reassurance. Then there's conviction bias. We believe that passionate, confident statements must be true. Demagogues and con artists exploit this constantly. They know a confident, dramatic performance beats 1,000 facts. They're not selling ideas, they're selling emotions. Perhaps most common is superiority bias. We all tend to think we're a bit more rational, ethical, and intelligent than average. We see irrationality in others but are blind to our own. When we make mistakes, we blame circumstances. When others make mistakes, we blame their character. These biases operate constantly, below our awareness. The first step to mastering your emotional self is catching them in action. When you feel strong emotion, anger, excitement, fear, ask yourself, how is this feeling shaping my thoughts right now? Am I looking for truth, or just looking for a way to feel better? Just asking that question creates distance. You create space between emotion and reaction, and in that space, rationality can grow. It's like the ancient Greeks imagined with Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who visited heroes in their darkest moments. She wasn't a loud voice. She was a quiet, calming presence that allowed them to see clearly and find the right path. This inner Athena exists within all of us. It's the part that can think long-term, see consequences, and resist immediate gratification. Cultivating it is lifelong practice, but it begins with a simple decision: to stop being a slave to your emotions and start becoming their master. Once we begin understanding our own irrationality, we notice something else. We're all incredibly self-absorbed. In any conversation, notice how much mental energy you spend not on listening, but on waiting for your turn to talk. Share your story. Give your opinion. We're all the main character in our own movie. This brings us to the second law, one of the most powerful and misunderstood forces in human nature, the law of narcissism. When we hear narcissist, we usually think of someone vain, arrogant, constantly seeking attention. But Robert Greene offers a deeper, more useful understanding. He asks us to imagine narcissism not as a simple character flaw, but as a spectrum of self-absorption we're all on. From birth, we have a deep, primal need for attention. As babies, our survival depends on it. No attention means no food, As we grow, this need becomes psychological. We need to feel seen, recognized, valued. Our entire sense of self-worth is built on the quality of attention we receive. The problem? There's limited attention to go around. We compete for it with siblings, classmates, colleagues. We can't rely on others to constantly validate us. So from early childhood, we develop a brilliant solution. We create a self, an internal image of who we are that we can love and rely on. This self comprises our tastes, opinions, values, our personality. This self-image acts like a thermostat, regulating our self-esteem. When we feel ignored or unappreciated, we retreat into this self and feel worthy. Most of us exist on the healthy end of the narcissistic spectrum. We have a solid sense of self that allows us to function. We can turn our attention outward, toward our work, relationships, and the world around us. But some people, often due to difficult childhoods, never develop this stable inner self. They may have been abandoned, or just as damagingly, been enmeshed by a parent who lived through them, giving them no room to form their own identity. These people fall into the realm of deep narcissism. Without that inner thermostat, they're completely dependent on external validation. Their entire existence is a desperate, unending quest for attention. You can recognize deep narcissists by key patterns. They're hypersensitive to criticism. Any challenge to their fragile ego feels like a physical attack. Without internal defenses, no well of self-love to draw from, they often react with explosive rage or thirst for revenge. They almost always position themselves as the victim. They constantly turn conversations back to themselves. If you mention your vacation, they'll interrupt to tell you about a better one they took. They're not listening. They're waiting for an opening to talk about themselves. They see other people not as individuals, but as self-objects, extensions of themselves, existing only to provide attention and validation. This is why relationships with deep narcissists are so draining. Everything must revolve around them. Greene gives us the chilling example of Joseph Stalin. In his early years, Stalin could be surprisingly charming. He'd listen to people with intense focus that made them feel incredibly important. He was a master at mimicking empathy. But it was all performance designed to draw people in and make them useful. As his power grew, the masks slipped. He became paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. His closest friends became objects to be controlled and eventually destroyed. He couldn't tolerate anyone who drew attention away from him. He needed to be the absolute center of the universe. This is the deep narcissist in power, and it's terrifying. So what's the antidote to this self-absorption we all possess? The answer lies in turning this energy outward. The highest form of human connection is empathy. Empathy isn't just feeling sorry for someone, it's the ability to step outside yourself and see the world from another person's perspective. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed with practice. Greene lays out a 4-part framework for building our empathic muscle. It starts with the empathic attitude. This means approaching every interaction assuming you're ignorant. Let go of your tendency to judge and categorize people. Everyone you meet is a new country to explore. Be curious. In conversations, reverse your natural impulse to talk and focus entirely on listening. Next is visceral empathy. This is about attuning yourself to the nonverbal cues people constantly emit. Pay attention to their tone of voice, body language, facial tension. These cues often tell you more than their words. They reveal underlying emotions, anxiety, defensiveness, excitement, driving their behavior. Then there's analytic empathy. This involves gathering information about people's past, values, and family background. Understanding where someone comes from helps you understand why they are the way they are. Abraham Lincoln was a master of this. He once said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." He understood that understanding breeds tolerance. Finally, you put it all together in the empathic skill. This is about getting feedback. You practice, observe, make guesses about what people are feeling, and adjust. Over time, your reads become more accurate. Developing empathy is transformative. It doesn't just make you better at dealing with people, it makes you a more complete human being. It pulls you out of the prison of your own ego and connects you to the vast, complex world of others. You move up the narcissistic spectrum, from self-absorption to connection. You become a healthy narcissist, someone with a strong sense of self, who doesn't need constant validation and can therefore freely give attention to others. This brings us to a critical part of understanding people. If we're all, to some degree, self-absorbed and playing a role, how do we ever know who anyone really is? This is the central question behind the law of role-playing. We humans are consummate actors. From birth, we learn how to put on a mask to get what we want. As children, we learn which expressions will get sympathy from our parents. As we get older, we learn how to present the right front to fit in with friends, get a job, navigate the complex social world. We play the part of the diligent student, the confident leader, the humble employee. As Shakespeare famously wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." We're so good at this acting that we often forget we're even doing it. We believe we're being our authentic selves, when in reality we're constantly adjusting our performance to suit the audience. This isn't necessarily bad. Society couldn't function if we all expressed every thought and impulse. The mask is essential for social harmony. The problem arises when we mistake the mask for reality. When we believe the charming, polite person in front of us is all there is, we leave ourselves vulnerable. We're inevitably surprised when their hidden insecurities, envy, or aggression suddenly leak out. Greene tells us the mask always has cracks. Our true feelings constantly leak out in nonverbal cues we cannot completely control. These are the flashes of irritation in the eyes, tension in the jaw, slight hesitation in the voice. This is the second language people speak all the time, and our task is to become fluent in it. The story of Milton Erickson powerfully illustrates this. As a teenager, Erickson was struck by polio and left almost completely paralyzed. He could only move his eyeballs. Trapped in bed, unable to speak or move, his world shrank to the small room where his family would gather and talk. With nothing else to do, he began to observe. And he started noticing something strange. He saw one of his sisters say yes to another, but her face held a slight smirk and her tone was flat. The yes clearly meant no. He saw her shake her head no ever so slightly, while verbally agreeing to something. He became obsessed with this second language. He saw how people's words often covered their true desires. He could see tension in someone's face that betrayed their fake smile, or impatience in the way they brushed back their hair. This experience transformed him. When he later recovered and became a pioneering psychiatrist, he used this skill to see into his patients, unconscious. He'd observe their walk, posture, how they sat in a chair. He once diagnosed a woman's secret love affair simply by how she tightly crossed her legs, with one foot tucked completely around her ankle. He explained that in his experience, every married woman having an affair locked her body up in a similar way. He learned that the body doesn't lie, even when the mouth does. Like Erickson, we can train ourselves to become superior readers of people. This isn't about learning tricks. It's about shifting our focus. We're so fixated on the words people say, we need to learn to listen with our eyes. Greene gives us some key areas to focus on. Look for mixed signals. This is when someone's body language contradicts their words. They congratulate you on a promotion, but their smile is tight and their eyes look sad. The negative cue is almost always more reliable. It's the leakage of their true feeling, in this case, envy. Pay attention to what happens when people are under stress, tired, or drinking. In these moments, their ability to control their mask weakens, and their true character often emerges. A person who seems calm and collected might suddenly become petty and paranoid under pressure. What you're seeing isn't a momentary lapse. You're seeing the real person. It's also crucial to establish a baseline. Everyone has a normal way of behaving. Some people are naturally animated. Others are reserved. Once you know someone's baseline, you can notice deviations. If a normally quiet person suddenly becomes loud and boisterous, or a confident person starts fidgeting nervously, it's a sign that something's going on beneath the surface. While we're learning to see through others' masks, we must also become masters of impression management. We must be conscious of the role we're playing and learn to present the best possible front. This isn't about being fake. It's about being a skillful social actor. This means mastering your own nonverbal cues. Learn to project confidence through relaxed posture and steady eye contact. Learn to flash a genuine smile, one involving the muscles around your eyes. These small signals can powerfully affect how people perceive you. It also means adapting your performance to your audience. How you speak to your boss should differ from how you speak to a subordinate or close friend. This isn't deception, it's social intelligence. Ultimately, the goal isn't just to see through the masks, but to understand what lies behind them. What drives people's compulsive behavior? What is the true strength of their character? This leads us to the law of compulsive behavior. Greene argues that the most important thing to look for in a person isn't their reputation, intelligence, or charm, it's their character. Character, he says, is like a stamp engraved on us from our earliest years. It's a collection of habits and patterns that compel us to act in certain ways, often beyond our awareness. As the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, character is destiny. If you ignore a person's character, you'll inevitably be surprised and harmed by their actions. People don't do something just once. The person who disappears under stress will do it again. The colleague who takes credit for your work will do it again. The partner who betrays your trust will do it again. These aren't isolated incidents. They're expressions of deep-seated patterns. The story of Howard Hughes tragically illustrates this law. To the world, Hughes was a dashing maverick, brilliant filmmaker, and aviation pioneer. He built a myth around himself as the rugged individualist who did everything his own way. But beneath this glittering facade was a deeply flawed character. Hughes's mother smothered him with anxious attention, and his father placed enormous expectations on him. He grew up feeling both completely dependent and bitterly resentful of that dependence. When his parents died suddenly, leaving him an orphan at 19, his true character emerged. He became obsessed with having absolute control over every aspect of his life. Anything less stirred up his old anxieties of being helpless. This deep need for control became the compulsive pattern that defined his entire life. When he made the film Hell's Angels, he fired director after director because he couldn't stand anyone else having authority. He had to oversee every shot, every detail. The film was a hit, but went wildly over budget and lost a fortune. He told everyone he'd learned his lesson, but he hadn't. Years later, when Hughes Aircraft got a massive government contract to build planes for World War II, the exact same pattern repeated. He couldn't delegate authority. He had to be consulted on the smallest decision. The company was chaotic, and top engineers quit in frustration. By war's end, not a single plane had been produced. He was a terrible businessman, but the profitable tool company he inherited from his father masked his failures and kept the myth of his genius alive. People like Charles Perrell, a brilliant production manager, were lured in by Hughes's charm and reputation. Hughes would promise them full authority, but within weeks, he'd be undermining their decisions and micromanaging everything. He repeated this pattern over and over in filmmaking, aviation, and personal relationships, leaving a trail of chaos and failed projects. In the end, his desperate need for control led him to lose it completely, as he descended into drug addiction and isolation, a prisoner of his own character. We're often blinded by people's reputations, just as so many were with Hughes. We fall for their charm and glittering resumes. We must train ourselves to look deeper, to see the patterns in their past. So how do you gauge the strength of someone's character? Greene tells us to look for a few key signs. How do they handle adversity? Do they crumble under pressure or rise to the occasion? People of strong character are resilient. They see setbacks as learning experiences. How do they work with other people? Can they delegate and trust others, or do they need to control everything? Strong characters can subsume their own ego for the good of the group. How do they handle power? As Lincoln said, if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Does success make them more arrogant and entitled, or do they remain grounded and respectful? Power doesn't change people. It reveals who they truly are. And what about your own character? You must be just as ruthless in examining your own patterns. What are the compulsive mistakes you keep making? What are the underlying insecurities that drive them? You cannot simply wish your character away. It's too deeply ingrained. But through awareness, you can begin to recognize your negative patterns and work to change them. You can transform your weaknesses into strengths. This is the path to true self-mastery. You accept the clay of your character and learn to sculpt it into something stronger and more beautiful. You stop being a prisoner of your past and become the author of your own destiny. Now, as we learn to see through the masks and understand the character of others, we need a way to influence them, to get them to move from their naturally defensive positions and see our point of view. This is where the law of defensiveness comes in. Life is competitive. We're all looking out for our own interests. We also have a deep need to feel that we're independent, that we're making our own choices. That's why, when someone tries to persuade us or change our mind, our first reaction is often resistance. To give in feels like surrender, a challenge to our autonomy. If you try to change people's minds by arguing with them or proving them wrong, you'll almost always fail. You might win the argument, but you'll lose the person. Why? Because you've made them feel stupid. You've attacked their self-opinion. Greene explains that we all have a core self-opinion made up of 3 universal beliefs. 1. I am autonomous, acting of my own free will. 2. I am intelligent in my own way. 3. I am basically a good and decent person. Any attempt at influence that challenges these core beliefs will be met with a wall of resistance. The key to persuasion is to do the opposite. You must confirm people's self-opinion. You must make them feel validated. The story of Lyndon B. Johnson's rise to power in the Senate is a master class in this law. When Johnson first arrived in the Senate in 1949, he was an impatient, ambitious young man. He made the mistake of approaching the powerful older Senator Tom Connally and essentially demanding a seat on a prestigious committee. Connally, feeling his authority challenged, put Johnson in his place, humiliating him. Johnson realized his mistake. He'd come on too strong. He had to completely change his approach he transformed himself into the picture of deference. He'd visit the offices of powerful older senators, not to ask for anything, but to seek their advice. He'd listen with rapt attention, his eyes wide, nodding as they shared their wisdom. He made them feel like brilliant mentors, the old masters of the Senate. This was especially effective with Senator Richard Russell, one of the most powerful and lonely men in Washington. Johnson became his disciple, his surrogate son. He mirrored Russell's values, work ethic, even his interest in baseball. He never asked for anything directly. Instead, he did favors for Russell, helping him modernize his staff. When Johnson finally wanted something, like a key committee chairmanship, he'd simply insinuate his desire, and Russell, seeing Johnson as an extension of himself, would make it happen. Johnson understood that the golden key to influence is lowering people's defenses. He did this by making them feel secure in their self-opinion. He validated their intelligence by asking for their advice. He confirmed their goodness by appealing to their sense of duty to party and country. He respected their autonomy by never seeming to force their hand. So how can you apply this? First, transform yourself into a deep listener. In any conversation, make your goal to understand the other person, not to promote your own ideas. Let them be the star of the show. People are so hungry for this kind of attention that they'll become addicted to your presence. Second, infect them with the proper mood. We're all incredibly susceptible to others' moods. If you approach people with warmth, acceptance, and even indulgence, they'll unconsciously mirror it back. They'll relax in your presence. Laughter and shared pleasures are powerful tools for building rapport. Third, confirm their self-opinion. Never make people feel stupid. Even if you disagree with them, find a point of agreement first. Say, I can see why you feel that way, and in many ways you're right. Here's another way to look at it. By validating their intelligence first, you open their mind to your suggestion. Frame your requests in a way that makes them feel noble and altruistic. They aren't just doing you a favor, they're contributing to a larger cause. Fourth, allay their insecurities. Everyone is insecure about something. Identify what people are most uncertain about: their creativity, their looks, their status, and offer subtle praise and reassurance in that area. As Lord Chesterfield advised his son, if you want to flatter a great statesman, don't praise his political skill, which he's already sure of. Praise his poetry, which he's secretly insecure about. And finally, use their resistance. Some people are naturally stubborn and resistant. They'll do the opposite of what you suggest, simply to assert their will. With these types, you can use a form of mental judo. Instead of pushing against their resistance, you go with it. You might even advocate for the very thing you don't want. In rebelling against your suggestion, they'll move in the direction you desired all along. This is the essence of reverse psychology. By mastering these strategies, you can become a master persuader. You learn to tame your own ego and focus entirely on the psychology of the other person. You're not manipulating them. You're leading them to see your point of view as their own, a decision they make of their own free will. This brings us to one of the most primal forces in human psychology: desire. We are creatures constantly wanting what we do not have. This is the foundation of the law of covetousness. Think about it. The moment we possess something, its allure begins to fade. Our minds drift towards something new, something different, something just out of reach. The more distant and unattainable an object seems, the more we desire it. This is the grass is always greener syndrome, and it's deeply wired into our nature. The story of Coco Chanel is the story of someone who understood this law intuitively and used it to build an empire. Chanel grew up an orphan in a bleak convent, where luxuries were forbidden. Her only escape was through romance novels, which filled her mind with fantasies of a world of wealth, beauty, and freedom. A world she could never have. This early experience of longing and forbidden desire shaped her entire psychology. She began her career as the mistress of a wealthy man, living in a beautiful chateau. She had, in a way, achieved her dream, but she was quickly disappointed. The reality was boring. The other courtesans were beautiful, but she felt like an outsider. She was restless. Then, one day she did something strange. She started wearing her lover's clothes, his tweed coats, his open-collared shirts. She topped it off with a simple straw boater hat. Suddenly, she felt a sense of freedom she'd never known, leaving behind the corsets and constricting gowns of the era. And she noticed something else. She was getting a new kind of attention. The other women were watching her with a look she recognized. It was envy. It was desire. In that moment, something clicked. She realized that instead of being the one who was always wanting, she could be the one who was wanted. She could be the object that stimulated fantasies in others. All she had to do was reverse her perspective and understand what creates desire. She understood that desire is built on mystery. She never talked about her impoverished past, instead inventing countless contradictory stories. No one really knew who she was. This blankness allowed people to project their own fantasies onto her. She became a myth. She understood that desire is linked to what is transgressive. Her clothes had a masculine edge, but remained feminine. They allowed women to cross gender boundaries, to feel a bit rebellious and provocative. She understood that we desire what others desire. This is the principle of social proof. She gave her hats and clothes to beautiful, well-connected women. When these Chanel clones were seen at all the best parties, it created a chain reaction of desire. Everyone wanted to be part of this exclusive new club. And she understood that desire is fed by absence. When she launched her famous perfume, Chanel No. 5, she didn't do a massive advertising campaign. She started by subtly spraying it in her store. When women asked what that amazing new scent was, she'd feign ignorance. She slipped unlabeled bottles into the bags of her best clients. Soon, a buzz began to build. Women were begging to buy this mysterious new perfume that no one could get. By making it scarce and elusive, she made it irresistible. Chanel transformed ordinary objects, a straw hat, cheap jersey fabric, a blend of floral scents, into objects of intense desire. She didn't sell clothes. She sold a fantasy of freedom, rebellion, and modern elegance. Greene tells us that we can all learn to apply this law. Instead of focusing on what you want, focus on the psychology of your audience. What are their unmet fantasies? What is missing in their lives? Create an aura of mystery around yourself and your work. Don't be an open book. Let people wonder about you. Associate what you offer with something new, exotic, or slightly taboo. Go against the grain. Challenge conventions. Create the illusion of popularity. Make it seem that others desire you or your work. This could be through testimonials, social proof, or creating a sense of exclusivity. And learn to use strategic absence. If you're too present, too available, people will take you for granted. By withdrawing from time to time, you make them want your return. You make them desire your presence. In a world saturated with noise and constant self-promotion, the person who understands the art of creating desire, the person who knows how to be an elusive and mysterious object, will have immense power. Now, as we've seen, success and attention can be intoxicating. They can feed our natural grandiosity, that deep-seated need to think highly of ourselves. But when this self-opinion becomes disconnected from reality, it becomes a dangerous delusion. This is the law of grandiosity. We all have a bit of grandiosity in us. It's what gives us the confidence to take on challenges and push past our limits. But when we achieve a measure of success, this can spiral out of control. We start to believe our own myth. We forget the role that luck, timing, and the help of others played in our achievements. We imagine we have the golden touch. The story of Michael Eisner's rise and fall at Disney is a cautionary tale of what happens when grandiosity goes unchecked. When Eisner took over as CEO of Disney in 1984, the company was a sleeping giant. He was a brilliant executive with a proven formula for success from his time at Paramount Pictures. He kept costs down, focused on high-concept films, and, in a few short years, turned Disney into the hottest studio in Hollywood. The success was staggering, and so was the attention. Eisner was on magazine covers, hailed as a corporate genius, the heir to Walt Disney himself, and he started to believe it. He began to subtract from his success the elements of luck, like inheriting the vast Disney library, just as the home video market was exploding, and the crucial contributions of his team, especially his president Frank Wells and his studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg. His grandiosity, fed by success, led him to make increasingly irrational decisions. He became obsessed with building Euro Disney, not because it was sound business. In fact, many advised against the Paris location, but because he saw it as a cultural statement, a monument to his own genius. He ignored his own cost-cutting formula and poured billions into the project. It turned into a financial disaster. As things started to go wrong, he couldn't admit he'd made a mistake. His grandiose self-opinion wouldn't allow it. Instead, he started blaming others. He turned on Jeffrey Katzenberg, the man behind the animation renaissance that had saved the company, with hits like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. He saw Katzenberg not as a valuable asset, but as a rival for attention, a threat to his myth. He became paranoid, believing Katzenberg was trying to undermine him. In 1994, in a fit of what can only be described as delusional rage, he fired Katzenberg, the most successful executive in Hollywood. It was the beginning of the end. He made one disastrous decision after another, culminating in the hiring of his friend Michael Ovitz as president, only to sabotage and humiliate him for 14 months before firing him. He'd become so detached from reality, so consumed by his own ego, that he destroyed the very empire he'd built. We're all susceptible to this success delusion. When things are going well, our natural grandiosity gets inflated. We must learn to counteract this pull. After any success, take time to analyze it. Acknowledge the role of luck and the contributions of others. This will keep you grounded. Never stop learning. Success can make us complacent. We rely on the formula that worked in the past, and we stop adapting. Treat every new project as if you're starting from zero. Listen to criticism. Grandiose people are notoriously thin-skinned. They see any criticism as a personal attack. You must actively seek out feedback, especially from people who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. And finally, tie your sense of greatness not to your ego, but to your work. Focus on your craft, on solving problems, on contributing to something larger than yourself. This is what Greene calls practical grandiosity. It's a healthy ambition, rooted in reality and accomplishment, not in fantasy. The gods of history are merciless with those who fly too high on the wings of grandiosity. They will always bring you crashing back down to earth. By knowing your limits and maintaining a realistic assessment of yourself, you can avoid this fate. As we navigate the complexities of our own nature and the people around us, we often feel adrift. We're pulled in different directions, by our moods, by others, opinions, by the lure of easy pleasure. We find ourselves in jobs or relationships without quite knowing how we got there. We sense a lack of direction, a feeling of aimlessness. This brings us to one of the most profound laws in the book, the law of aimlessness. Unlike animals, who are guided by instinct, we humans have to rely on our conscious decisions. But without a compass, we're lost. Greene argues that the way to avoid this fate, to find our direction in the chaos of life, is to discover our sense of purpose. This purpose, or life's work as Greene calls it, isn't something you invent. It's something you discover. It's a voice from within that speaks to your uniqueness. We're all born with a set of primal inclinations, a natural attraction to certain subjects or activities. For Marie Curie, it was the mesmerizing sight of chemistry instruments in her father's office when she was 4 years old. For Steve Jobs, it was the wondrous gadgets in the window of an electronics store. For writer Flannery O'Connor, it was her father's belief in her destiny as a writer, a belief she held on to after his early death. These aren't random interests. They're signals of our calling. As we get older, this inner voice is often drowned out by others. Voices, our parents, teachers, peers. We're told what we should be, what we should like. We lose contact with our own uniqueness. We choose career paths that are practical or prestigious, but have no real connection to our spirit. This is the source of the deep boredom, insecurity, and depression that so many of us feel in midlife. The journey to finding your purpose is a journey of reconnection. It's about listening for that inner voice you've long ignored. Greene tells us to look back at our childhood. What were the subjects or activities that fascinated you, that felt natural and easy? What did you do that brought you a feeling of flow, where you lost track of time? These are clues to your calling. Once you have a sense of your life's work, it becomes your internal guidance system. It gives you a direction, a path to follow. It doesn't mean your path will be a straight line. You can still explore and have adventures. But there's an overall direction that frees you from the anxiety of aimlessness. The story of Martin Luther King Jr. is a powerful example of a man finding and following his purpose. As a young man, King was pulled in many directions. His father wanted him to be a minister and take over his church. His professors wanted him to become a scholar. His wife wanted him to live a comfortable, safe life in the North. King himself loved parties, nice clothes, and the academic life. But he felt a different calling. He had a vision of returning to the South, of becoming a minister in a community where he could make a practical difference. This vision was so strong that he chose to go to Montgomery, Alabama, one of the most segregated and dangerous cities in the country. It was a decision that made no practical sense, but he felt it was his destiny. When the Montgomery bus boycott erupted, he was reluctantly pulled into a leadership role. He was filled with fear and self-doubt. The death threats, the infighting, the immense pressure, it was more than he'd bargained for. One night, on the verge of quitting, he prayed for strength. And in that moment, he heard a voice from within, a voice he was sure was God's, telling him to stand up for righteousness, and I will be with you. This experience galvanized him. The voice gave him a higher sense of purpose that transcended his personal fears. It became his compass. It guided him through the darkest days of the civil rights movement. It gave him the courage to go to Birmingham, to provoke a crisis that would awaken the conscience of the nation. It gave him the clarity to see that his mission wasn't just about civil rights, but about fighting poverty and injustice everywhere. A high sense of purpose acts as a force multiplier. It channels all the different sides of your character in one direction. It gives you focus, resilience, and an unstoppable energy. It raises you above the petty distractions and dramas of daily life. Discovering your calling is the most important task in your life. It's the path to fulfillment and to realizing your full potential. Don't leave it to chance. Listen for that inner voice. Trust your inclinations. And once you find your path, follow it with all the strength you can muster. As we've explored these deep forces within ourselves, our irrationality, our narcissism, our aggression, it's become clear that we often wear a mask, a persona that hides our true feelings. This hidden part of our personality is what Carl Jung called the shadow. Understanding it is the key to the law of repression. The shadow is made up of all the qualities we try to deny about ourselves. It's our insecurities, our selfish impulses, our secret desires for power or revenge. As children, we were bursting with this raw, untamed energy. We were aggressive, selfish, and manipulative when we wanted something. But as we grew up, we were socialized. We learned to be nice, to be cooperative, to fit in. All those socially unacceptable traits were pushed underground, into the shadow. We're generally unaware of our own shadow. It operates in the unconscious. But it doesn't just disappear, it leaks out in strange ways. It comes out in our dreams. It emerges in moments of stress, in emotional outbursts, in accidental behavior where we do something self-destructive and blame it on an uncontrollable impulse. It reveals itself in our vehement denials, when we loudly condemn a quality in others that we secretly possess ourselves. The story of Richard Nixon is a tragic portrait of a man destroyed by his own shadow. To the public, Nixon crafted a persona of toughness, resilience, and iron-willed rationality. He was the, quote, new Nixon, a man who had overcome every setback. But this was a mask that concealed a deeply insecure and vulnerable child within. Nixon's childhood was marked by a cold, abusive father and a moody, often absent mother. He grew up feeling unloved and needy. To survive, he repressed these feelings and built a tough exterior. But the unloved child was still there, in the shadows of his personality. As president, especially under the stress of the office, his shadow would emerge. In private late-night meetings with his staff, the tough, rational leader would disappear, and the dark Nixon would take over. He'd become paranoid, seeing enemies everywhere. He'd rant about his old political wounds, his voice filled with bitterness and a thirst for revenge. He'd indulge in anti-Semitic and racist tirades. This was the Nixon on the secret White House tapes. It was a man so consumed by his insecurities that he was willing to break the law to get an edge on his political opponents. The Watergate break-in wasn't a rational political calculation. It was an act of the shadow, a product of his paranoia and his deep-seated need to crush his enemies. When the existence of the tapes was revealed, Nixon was trapped. He couldn't destroy them, because that would be an admission of guilt. But he couldn't release them, because they'd reveal the dark side he'd spent his entire life trying to conceal. In the end, the tapes were his undoing. They revealed a man who wasn't strong but weak, not rational, but driven by petty resentments and childish insecurities. As he said in his final emotional speech to his staff, "Those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself." He was, in that moment, describing his own tragedy. We all have a shadow. The more we repress it, the more powerful and dangerous it becomes. The goal isn't to eliminate the dark side. That's impossible. It's to become aware of it, to confront it, and to integrate it into our personality. How do we do this? First, see the shadow. Look for its signs in your own behavior. Notice your emotional outbursts, your moments of extreme touchiness. Pay attention to the qualities you vehemently deny in yourself, or harshly judge in others. These are often reflections of your own repressed traits. Look at your dreams. They're a direct line to your unconscious. Second, embrace the shadow. Don't be ashamed of your dark side. It's a part of what makes you human. Abraham Lincoln was aware of his own split personality, a cold, ambitious streak on one side, and a deep melancholy on the other. Instead of denying these qualities, he channeled them. He poured his aggressive energy into winning debates and elections. He transformed his sensitivity into profound empathy for the public. Third, explore the shadow. Your unconscious contains immense creative energy. Learn to tap into it. Give yourself unstructured time to play with ideas. Pay attention to your intuitions and hunches. Some of the greatest discoveries in science and art have come not from logical deduction, but from flashes of insight that bubble up from the unconscious. And finally, show the shadow. We spend so much energy trying to be nice and agreeable. This can make us timid and inauthentic. You must learn to consciously show your darker, more assertive qualities. This doesn't mean being a jerk. It means being willing to be impudent, to challenge conventions, to care less about what people think of you. It means being more authentically yourself. When you integrate your shadow, you become a more complete and powerful human being. You're no longer at war with yourself. You radiate an authenticity that is magnetic. People are drawn to those who are comfortable in their own skin, who aren't afraid to be fully human, with all the light and darkness that entails. As we come to the end of our journey through the laws of human nature, it's easy to feel a little overwhelmed. The book is vast, filled with stories and insights that challenge the way we see ourselves and the world. But if there's one central lesson to take away from Robert Greene's work, it's this: self-awareness is the ultimate power. This book isn't a manual for manipulating others. It's a mirror. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths about our own nature, our irrationality, our narcissism, our aggression, our tendency to conform. We're not the purely rational, independent, and good-hearted individuals we like to imagine ourselves to be. We're complex, contradictory creatures, driven by deep-seated forces we're often unaware of. The path to wisdom, then, isn't to deny these forces, but to understand them. It's to become a dispassionate observer of your own psychology. When you can see the envy stirring within you, you can choose to transform it into emulation instead of letting it curdle into resentment. When you can feel the pull of grandiosity after a success, you can consciously ground yourself in reality. When you can recognize the group's emotional contagion sweeping over you, you can create the mental space to think for yourself. This is the freedom that Greene's work offers. It isn't freedom from human nature, but freedom within it. It's the freedom that comes from understanding the rules of the game, so that you're no longer a pawn, but a player. So how can you begin applying these profound lessons in your own life, starting today? Here are a few simple, practical actions you can take. First, practice the art of deep listening. For the next 24 hours, in every conversation you have, make your sole objective to understand the other person's point of view. Fight the urge to plan what you'll say next. Fight the urge to tell your own story. Just listen. Pay attention not just to their words, but to their tone, their body language. You'll be amazed at what you discover, both about them and about yourself. Second, become a pattern detective. Think of one negative pattern that keeps recurring in your life. It could be in your relationships, your career, or your creative projects. Now, for a moment, let go of the story you usually tell yourself about why this happens. the story that blames other people or bad luck. Ask yourself, with brutal honesty, what role does my own character, my own compulsive behavior, play in creating this pattern? This simple shift in perspective, from looking outward to looking inward, is the first step toward breaking free. And third, learn to see the shadow. Pay attention to a moment today when you feel a strong, negative emotional reaction to someone. It could be a celebrity, a politician, or someone you know personally. Ask yourself, what quality in this person is triggering such a strong response in me? Is it possible that this quality is something I deny or repress in myself? This isn't about condoning bad behavior in others. It's about using your reactions as a mirror to see your own hidden depths. The Laws of Human Nature isn't an easy book. It asks us to look at the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But in doing so, it offers a path to a more authentic, powerful, and fulfilling life. It teaches us that by understanding what makes us human, in all its darkness and its light, we can become more than just a product of our nature. We can become its master. That was a summary of The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. We've certainly touched on the major themes today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the layout, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the land yourself. The real power of this book is in the details, in the quiet moments when a particular historical story or a simple, profound sentence resonates with your own life in a way you never expected. This summary is a doorway. If any of the ideas we've explored have sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to step through it. Grab a copy of the book, because reading it isn't just an act of learning. It's an experience that can fundamentally change the way you see yourself and everyone around you. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you've found this journey valuable, please consider giving this a like and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue to grow and learn together.